In this video series, we are pleased to introduce some of the writings of Dion Fortune to you. This video is about the 10th chapter, Etheric Magnetisms, from Practical Occultism in Daily Life, in which Dion Fortune writes about etheric and astral influences and how these influences can manifest themselves in the family and in childhood. Brotherhood of the Eternal Light, Teaching the Western Mysteries.
Chapter 10 Etheric Magnetism. Our knowledge of electricity is of comparatively recent development, and although extensive practical applications have been made of this elusive energy, we are still ignorant concerning its real nature. Recent advances in knowledge, however, have shown us that its distribution is much wider spread than had previously been recognized. In fact, we might safely say that electricity is all-pervasive, and it only requires the development of instruments of sufficient sensitiveness to demonstrate the fact. It had long been known that the human body was of the nature of an electrical battery, that nervous impulses were transmitted by means of weak electric currents running along the nerve fibers, and that the electrical conductivity of the body changed with the change of emotional states. Recent discovery has produced an instrument of such sensitiveness that not only can it demonstrate that the human body gives off electrical energy, but can actually measure the amount, greater and less in different individuals, finding it to be the greatest in young, virile males, and least in the elderly and those in weak health. A wide range of experimental work opens up along these lines, and it will be interesting to see how closely it agrees with the traditions of esoteric science. For this electrical energy of the human body has long been known to initiates, although other names have been given to it than those that modern science is coining to fit the facts that are coming to light, and it is well known to be the basis of much occult phenomena. Its practical applications in our daily lives are fairly widely realized, but unfortunately, the value of this knowledge has been vitiated by the amount of superstition and autosuggestion that have grown up around it. We need to find the middle way between a stubborn disregard of all subtle influences that exposes us to much needless discomfort or even more serious harm, and a hypersuggestible fattiness that ends in hypochondriasis. But we recognize the actuality of an influence. It does not follow that we must forthwith surrender to it. There are two ways in which we should react to it. Firstly, by learning all we can about it and making use of it medicinally, as it were, learning its indications and dosage and how to direct and control its activities. And secondly, by learning how to neutralize or deflect it if its influences under certain conditions should be found deleterious. Experimental science has now caught up with esoteric tradition in asserting that every living creature is an electric battery and has learnt to measure the electrical energy quantitatively. The next step will be the demonstration of the varying qualitative nature of the electrical energy generating by that living battery. This diversity of quality esoteric science clearly recognizes and classifies under the 7 planetary influences, using various divinatory methods as tests and indicators. By these means, a rough approximation can be arrived at, though we shall have to wait for experimental science to give us precise methods of testing and measuring. Meanwhile, however, we can take the esoteric doctrines as working hypotheses and show their practical application to our lives. A very small amount of experimenting along these lines will soon convince us of the actuality of the influences we are dealing with. First and foremost, Let us conceive of every form, whether animate or inanimate, as emanating a magnetic field of electrical energy. Then let us conceive of the exchange of magnetism between any objects that come within range of each other's electrical fields. Let us also remember that this magnetism varies in quality as well as in quantity, and that the variation depends upon the nature of the rhythm of its pulsating energies. It will follow then that we are all the time receiving electromagnetic influences of a very subtle nature from everything with which we come in contact, and from every person with whom we are in any sort of relationship. Equally, it follows that all and each of these will be taking electrical energy from us according to their individual nature. We must not, however, run away with the idea that all interchange of magnetic energies is of the nature of vampirism. This is far from being the case. To give and receive magnetism is normal to us, and the lack of such an interchange affects us as harmfully as the lack of the necessary vitamins, equally subtle and little understood factors in the economy of living creatures. There is a normal exchange of magnetism which is intensely stimulating, both to those who give and to those who receive. The breaking of this circuit produces distinct nervous pathologies which can only be cured by its restoration. This interchange can, however, be subject to certain pathologies, and these also we must consider in their place. We can see both these aspects of magnetic influence clearly illustrated in the relationship between mother and child. A young child will not thrive without intimate personal love and contact with someone who cares for it as an individual. This is so well known that nowadays young children are never herded together in large orphanages, but farmed out in individual cottage homes in small groups. For it was found that the infant mortality in the mass rearing of babies was abnormally high, and the intelligence developing among them abnormally low. So tangible is the influence of magnetism of the mother that a well-known doctor recommends that a nervous, highly strung mother should not hold her child in her arms, but support it on a cushion so as to insulate it from her disturbed magnetic influence. The influence of the father is just as important as that of the mother, but it does not reach the child directly during its earliest years, but comes to it through the mother. This has only to be pointed out to be recognized, for how different is the influence transmitted to her child by a woman happy and secure in her marriage from that transmitted by one who is uneasy and unhappy. As the child grows older, however, it should normally outgrow the influence of the mother magnetism and become receptive to the influence of the father magnetism, which ushers it into the group mind of the race and makes it a regular member thereof. For just as the mother gives birth to a child as a separate physical individual, so the father gives birth to it as a social individual. We do not give sufficient importance to the part played by the race life in our individual lives, nor recognize that man is a social animal, and that his group relationships are as much a part of his mental being as his other instincts. In this social relationship, both mundane and psychological, the father is all important. It is a great mistake to leave the children to the management of the mother after the nursery days are over. They are far better off under the discipline of the more rough and ready male, who does not fuss and fidget over trifles and gives a sound thrashing for serious offenses, than in the oversensitive and oversensitizing hands of the female parent. More freedom and less tenderness are a better preparation for a life than the mother love so often and so unwisely given. Mental specialists know well the results brought about by the over-prolonging of the sensitizing feminine magnetism and the consequent starvation of the invigorating male magnetism. It is for this reason that the family and not the individual must always remain the prime social union, and that the experiments in child culture undertaken by the Soviet have had to be modified. It is for this reason also that free love is an impractical proposition, because it produces homeless children, and a child never thrives outside a home. A home is as essential to a child as a nest to a bird. For in the home, and in the home alone, can he enjoy the right magnetic conditions for his development. In the immediate magnetism of his mother's arms, he receives essential spiritual vitamins during his earliest years. Later, in the atmosphere of his father's pride and protectiveness, he receives the influences essential for his development as a social being. Adequate substitutes are hard to find for these two personal relationships. The mother's is perhaps the easiest to replace, because most women get fond of any small child that is in their care, but the average man can seldom be got to feel any pride in someone else's offspring, and it is this family pride behind him which is such an invaluable support to an adolescent finding his place in the great world opening before him. There is no substitute for the magnetism given off by happiness and affection, and pride and protection within a secure home circle, and children who have this start in the life have an incalculable advantage over those who are born of contention. Moreover, they will tend to reproduce their own home conditions when they come to have a home and children of their own.
Violet Mary Firth, also known as Dion Fortune, was an important British occultist, ceremonial magician, and author. The Brotherhood of the Eternal Light is in direct lineage with the tradition of Dion Fortune and recognizes her as a spiritual ancestor. We hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions, please feel free to write them in the comments. We will create a video to answer your questions after this video series. Would you be interested in us commenting on the writings of Dion Fortune and explaining in more detail her teachings in spiritual philosophy? If so, let us know in the comments. Visit our free online course on Western mysteries and Kabbalah or our live events on these topics. And if you haven't already done so, please like this video and subscribe to the channel.